Hello and welcome to Celtic World, the Celtic YouTube channel and podcast that connects the Celtic family all around the world, from Aberdeen to Abu Dhabi, from Leith to Leon. Wherever you are, you're all part of a Celtic World, and we're delighted to have you along. Before we get into greeting some of our viewers, just introduce the panel. Obviously, the lunatics have taken over the asylum. Gav is still on holiday. He's bobbing around in the ocean somewhere with his son and doing a scuba license. So that's great. We've probably panicked him a bit because we've had some technical issues in the run up to this one, but we have got there and hopefully all will go smooth from here. But yeah, I'm sure the boss is a little bit nervous. So there might be some additional floaters in the ocean where he is, or in his wetsuit. Hopefully not, but you never know. So yeah, because of the technical issues, we've got. So I'm your host, Paul, usually on, but not usually given this level of responsibility. So I'll do my best. And the other sort of co-captain of this ship, well, Gav's not here. Steve, on the other side of Sydney, I'm in Perth. So other side of Australia, I'm in Perth. Steve's in Sydney. Steve's joining us as part of that technical issues. Thanks, Steve. How are you, mate?
No worries, Paul. Yeah, happy to be here, and happy I live in Sydney and not Aberdeen.
Well, me too. Given I was born less than an hour from up the road from there. It gave me a bit of PTSD to watch that at 4 o'clock this morning. But yeah, I was similarly pleased to be extremely far away from there. And we've also got joining us from Brian, a bit closer to Aberdeen and probably looking rugged up. Brian, how are you? How is your neck of the woods this morning?
Not too bad. It's mild enough. Like it wasn't as bad as Aberdeen, but like anything else, I'm starting to get the man flu. It's that time of year. I managed to avoid it. Like I heard you guys weren't too good either. But,
yeah, there's a weird. We've got a weird summer version at the minute that seems to have gone around. Bit of viral cough, throat. It's sort of the place is riddled. So, excuse us if we're not completely clear, but we'll do our best. So we've got a few people in the comments. A couple of the regulars. Monty, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Where we are, Mickey Moynihan, great to have you along. And we've got a few others. 420 somewhere. Good to see you. And we'll get into some of those. Oh, Monty giving us the usual roll call, Dickie, even though he's not here. So yeah, Dickie is Gav for non-regular viewers. We'll just give you a little bit of a rundown in terms of what we're going to cover today. Got a bit of a sort of slightly different show for you. Gav's been doing some work prior to going on holiday. Obviously doesn't trust us to have a full hour, just the usual format. So he's given us some homework to upload, and it caused us panics, but we're here. So yeah, we're going to cover the Aberdeen game. We're not going to probably go into this much detail. It probably wasn't a classic. If you've got your cliche bingo card ready, we'll be covering as many of those as possible about that game last night. Then we've got a lot of you, if you're on Twitter or Blue Sky or you're across social media, you'll be aware of a page or a poster called Scotland's Coefficient. Does a fantastic job in terms of updating on a weekly basis where Scotland's coefficient is from a national point of view and what that means for the individual teams when they enter into Europe. Gav did an interview with him just at the weekend or just a few days ago. Wide-ranging conversation with a specific Celtic tilt, obviously, and it was sort of even went into other broader strategic decisions and details and how it might affect the club, both sort of moving forward, like where we are now and moving forward into the future. So it's a really good discussion. Looking forward to having a bit of a chat with a panel and you guys in the comments afterwards. So please throw your thoughts into us when we cover that. That'll be in the middle of the show. And then, yeah, as I say, we'll come back and have a chat about some of the key points and what we think it means for us as we push on from here. And then we'll do probably a reasonably brief preview of Hibs at that point. And then that should see us through the show. So I guess given we are tight on time, given we've got that excellent interview to play, I'll just get straight into the game. Maybe start rather than dissect, the nitty gritty of the game. I maybe just get a summary of your thoughts, sort of how you're feeling going in, Steve, and kind of how you feel after that sort of 95 minutes or so, 100 minutes.
Yeah, it was a tough old game, wasn't it? It wasn't one for the purists. I think a lot of that, the vast majority of that was down to the conditions, which were absolutely horrendous. And I think both teams struggled to cope with it. You could see people struggling to take a first touch, struggling to get to judge the weight of passes, to judge the weight of crosses, anything up in the air just was all over the place and impossible to predict where it was going to come down. And I think it took the team, it certainly took Celtic quite a while to cope with that. Aberdeen did their usual, came out, were very physical. They pressed with a lot of energy and they pressed quite well. And we weren't able to play our normal game in the first half. But as per usual, second half, Rodgers made a few substitutions. They all pretty much worked out the way he wanted them to. And then we end up winning the game probably quite deservedly, to be honest, from my point of view anyway. Even although, we had a few scares in the last couple of minutes. But I think we deserve to win the game. And I think it's, when we look back in the story of this season, it's going to be a massive 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. There, Steve's covered some of our classic cliches of that kind of game. The way, look, Ian, who's usually on a Thursday, reminded us in the old cliche. Well, the weather's there for the same for both teams, but obviously when they play in it, more regularly than we do, especially with that howling wind that comes in behind the Dick Donald stand and in off the beach in the North Sea. But equally, they don't want to pass it on the deck and really, play the same football as we do. So absolutely suited them. And yeah, I think I shared it on Blue Sky and with the group chat. It was 8 degrees last night in Aberdeen when the game was on. Felt like -5 because of the wind and rain. And Steve, you've probably been there as well, but I don't know about you, Brian, but I've certainly been in the away section at Pittodrie in December, and it is bloody hell. I was there in that game. We won 6-0. Reggie Blinker scored the volley at the back post after the Rabona by Weghorst. It was snowing that day. It's bitter up there. So yeah, I don't think we can underestimate the conditions. But yeah, you've got to find a way. And it didn't really look likely for a chunk of the game. It looked like it was, they were just going to be able to rough us up, and we didn't really get, as expected, we didn't really get the protection you'd want from Don Robertson, which is pretty typical. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. It's they're the kind of games that you need to win to be champions. Now, I think we'll win this title with plenty to spare. So, we probably could have afforded to drop points, but it really opens up a gap. That's now 7 points clear with a game in hand on Aberdeen, who obviously are our closest rivals. I think it's another 4 back to Rangers after that. So we're well in control at this point. Brian, your thoughts similar to Steve, and you're feeding down for a bit of it, but overall, I guess, be happy with the outcome.
Yeah, the result was more important than the performance. And again, Rodgers, the substitutions made the difference. I was sitting at the weekend slagging off Taylor, and then he comes on and has a bit of a worldie, sets up the goal for Atate, and at the end he was there with a headed clearance and the volley out from the corner. But the main thing was just to get the points, and I think that I hope Aberdeen stay in touch. I hope they don't go off the rails a bit, because it's good to see them taking points off the rest of them. I think they will. I think they'll stay there or thereabouts. But again, cream rises to the top. There's another cliche. We get in. We got the job done. We came away with the 3 points, and I think it's the record number of away wins this season. It's up there with the Invincible season, I think.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure the exact stats on that, but certainly the start of the season has been now better or it was better prior to these games. I think the last 2 games it was better. Obviously, we've added another couple. So yeah, let's not get carried away with ourselves. A long way to go for another invincible season, but there's an argument to be made that this squad is deeper, stronger, and potentially got the ability to replicate that. We'll just touch on a couple of the key points in the game. Steve, couple of big things, or couple of major things first half. Probably the challenge between Kyogo and Ross Doohan, ex-Celtic youngster. Anything more to be made in that? Then, there's nothing given on the pitch. Bobby Madden was later saying it. He thought it could probably be a yellow. Obviously, anyone red or blue was looking for a red. I don't think that was necessarily going to be the case. It was good to see him get up, I guess. But any thoughts that the ref should have taken a different view?
No, I didn't think it was anything more than just a coming together, as they like to say. There's another cliche for you. a coming together of two players. The ball was there to be won. I think that was a factor of the weather, that the ball held up more than you would probably expected it to do. For a split second, I thought that Kyogo's got half a chance of getting a nick on this ball here. So, look, he'd every right to go for it, and he didn't. He didn't go in with the studs. He didn't lead with the studs.
Yeah.
And it was just an unfortunate collision between his thigh and Doonan's head. So I think it was just an accidental collision. But when it happened, and when they start replaying it 100 times for the VAR, and you don't know what they're going to concoct between Robertson and whatever other clown was in the VAR for the night. You never know what they were going to end up with, but I think it ended up being the correct decision. Just play on. And you're right. It was good to see him getting up without any major damage.
Yeah, absolutely. It did look a bad one. But yeah, no blame on Kyogo's part. I agree with you. I'll push it on because we've only got a bit of time on this before we need to move on. Brian, the other probably contentious decision in the first half, or potentially contentious decision as far as Celtic fans are concerned, is the Bernardo goal direct from the corner. Given as a free kick, Maeda had a warning just before then, so the writing was pretty much on the wall. Any qualms with the ref's decision to chop that off?
Not really, but I mean, another dead could have been given. There's another cliche, but it's just great technique from Bernardo. Just lovely to watch. Another. I never thought I'd say that. George Best scored a goal from a corner, and it was disallowed, and then he did it again directly after it. This is a true story. You know me.
Yeah.
But for the love of the game, they should have just given it. But then again, I would have given it.
I think the green tinted specs me on it. My grievance with that is Miera's had a warning. The ref is itching to give a foul. The wind's swirling. The keeper's off. He's been called up. He's the second choice keeper. Not a lot of experience at that level. He's playing against his ex team. Hoy it in on top. Like Miera could have given him a 1 or 2 yard gap, and then Hoy just see where it lands and see what happens. I didn't think he needed to be backing into that level, and as soon as he did, I think he gives the referee an opportunity to give a foul. And I was just a bit frustrated. My two frustrations on was one that he gave him the opportunity to give it, and my other frustration around corners prior to those from the right, where it made sense to swing him in from Bernardo. We had a couple, maybe even 3 on the left. And Bernardo was going over there to take it. And I was just thinking, with that wind, you want to drop that right on top of the goalie. We've got Kuhn with a great left foot. Vibe's got a great left foot. Why is one of them not over there? Later on, obviously, Cowan was on and he took them. But I just felt we should be throwing them in on top of the keeper. Wind, new goalkeeper, etc., etc. So I don't think we played the conditions first half as well as we should have. We had that wind that was holding up the ball. We didn't really use that to our advantage to try and throw it over the top of their fullbacks and let Maeda and Kuhn run at them. We tried to play through them, which is a normal game. And I think you got to mix it up a bit in those kind of conditions. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly from me, I thought it was a terrible decision from the referee. I don't think there's a foul there at all. I think Maeda's just sort of held his ground, which he's quite entitled to do. And I think you're right. If he hadn't warned him just before it, I think that's a goal. When it went in, when I first saw it, I couldn't believe he gave a foul for that, because he's not impeded him. He's not got arms on him. He's not holding him. He's just standing there holding his ground, and he's entitled to do that. And it's the keeper's job to get either round him or over him or push him out the way. And he can do that as well. He can push back at him to get that ball. But the keeper was just nowhere. He was flapping. and he flapped at the ball and it's ended up in the net. And I think it was a terrible decision. But you know, I do agree with you. The corners were a frustration to me as well. We took far too many out-swinging corners, not just from Bernardo, but when McCowan came on as well. We started doing. He started taking corners well. Most of his were out-swingers, and we didn't really put the goalkeeper under enough pressure. So I 100% agree with that. But I think it was just the conditions, and we just struggled to cope with them. Certainly for the first 45 minutes.
Well, John Clements agrees with us as well. I get you having an identity and you want to play that way, but sometimes the conditions, it's either doesn't work for you or you can be more effective by changing it up. So yeah, I think we could have done a wee bit more. Like, we're nearly going to wrap this up. Just a bit of commentary on the goal. You know, Brian's already talked up Greg Taylor. I think it was the right substitution. Valley had been targeted by the Aberdeen team manager and Duke. He was falling about all over the place and continued to do that without any repercussions. He was booked for a pretty soft foul, I would suggest, probably on the back of a pull that was missed earlier. He had a sharp pull on the halfway line in the earlier attack and nothing was given. And then there was a pretty innocuous challenge and he got a yellow card for it. And I think Ian picked it up on the group chat, and I think we probably all agree it was the right decision to hook him at halftime just to protect him. Which is a bit of a shame because I thought he was having a pretty good game considering nobody was having a brilliant game, but he was as he always is, on the front foot, going forward, looking to make forward passes and get involved higher up the pitch. But Taylor did a great job when he came on, and obviously was key to the goal. Brian, you want to talk us through it?
It was great technique. I mean, Taylor had got the ball on the left-hand side and nice wee, so I don't know, like a half chip into Tate, took it on the chest. A great, excellent technique. I mean, you couldn't. I don't think there's anyone else in the team could have scored that goal. You know, for us, just fantastic. I think that Tate is really having a really stormer of a season, and I don't want to say anything, but touch wood. I mean, we ever had him for a full season? You know, this is the longest I think we've had him without an injury. Didn't he get injured last year? I think it was against.
Well, let's not put the hex on him, but yeah, fantastic.
You know, it's just fun, and I think CCV had a fabulous game last night. He got out a couple of times. Sorry, a few chances in the second half. Aberdeen. Trusty was a bit ropey, but as Stephen mentioned earlier, the conditions weren't particularly good. But you know, I defend Trusty a bit there. I've seen a few people say he was ropey. I think apart from that, you know, that little stop and touch and that gave them the chance to shoot inside the box, which you know was a bit of an error, obviously, and CCV bailed him out with a great block. I thought he was pretty accomplished. He took the ball well on his, you know, in the conditions. He got forward, you know, he strided forward. He pushed the ball forward, made forward passes. He didn't take too many touches, and he was commanding in the air. So I thought aside from that, and there was an error there, but we got off with it. I didn't think he was any much of an issue, really. Stephen, thoughts?
Yeah, I thought the whole back four were really good, including Valle. I thought he was having a great game. I thought it was a disgraceful booking, considering what the ref had let some of the Aberdeen players away with without bookings up to that point. And I think it was a disgraceful booking. I think he was fouled first, without a doubt. The guy basically ran into the back of him and then just collapsed to the ground. And I thought that was a shambles. So they were left with no choice but to take him off because, you know, in those conditions, you're just one mistimed slide tackle away from a second yellow and a sending off, and you're down to 10 men. So credit to Greg Taylor. He's come on and he didn't look, you know, he had a great game, made a contribution, an assist for the goal, and made a contribution in the defensive third as well. So I thought the whole back four were the best part of our team, and the goalkeeper, I would throw the goalkeeper into that as well, who made some really good blocks when he had to. And his distribution was also good again. So Schmeichel gets top marks for me as well. But it was just getting back to the goal again. Brian is 100% correct. Hatate is the only player on our team that can score that goal. In fact, he's probably the only player in the Scottish game that can score that goal. Just the way he's took it on his chest, and with his left, it's a left foot half volley with the kind of outside his foot, and he just sort of teased it into the far corner with no time to set himself, all off balance, and in honking conditions as well. So an absolutely world class goal and a great finish. Didn't have his best game, I didn't think, Hatate. I think he was one of the ones that suffered with the conditions. He just couldn't seem to get his passing range, and his little layoffs are usually pretty accurate. We're sort of going astray. And but that goal just made up for it all. What a great goal! And again, as I mentioned earlier, when we look back at the story of this season, that goal is going to be up there with one of the highlights of the season. Certainly one of the big points in the season for us.
Spot on.
I think Shinnie should have been booked, sent off. Some of the tackles he was putting in, he near broke ankles in two when he came on.
Him and Nielsen should probably get booked the minute they walk on the pitch, because it's only a matter of time before it happens. And as usual, they got more leeway than is typically the case. Look, brilliant chat, great result. Terrible night condition wise, but got out of there with the points. Gonna have to move it along because we've got this excellent interview with Scotland's coefficient to play. So I'm going to put that on now. It's about 20 minutes, and then we will come back and have a chat about it. So look forward to watching this.
From Scotland's coefficient, welcome to a Celtic world.
Hi, Gavin. Great name you've got there. Thanks very much for having me on.
Well, delighted to have you. And today is all about the coefficient, the UEFA coefficient. So you're here to make it as simple as possible for all of us to digest. So the plan is we're going to talk about what it is, how it's constructed a little bit, and then what does it mean going forward in simple terms, particularly for Celtic in the years ahead. Okay? So that's the plan. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Do you think we're going to succeed?
Of course we will. Two Gavins, how could it go wrong?
All right. So first place to start is to look at our current coefficient status. Now, according to the UEFA website today, we're in 17th position, as you can see there, which is not great. Previously, we've been in much better positions, 9th and 11th. And, well, we'll get into what the significance of that is shortly. The reason we haven't been quite so good is because, well, we've been big crap in Europe, haven't we? Particularly us. Celtic haven't been great. And I know this is a bit of a bone of contention, but, well, talk us through who's been getting the coefficient points in recent years, according to this graphic.
Yeah, so the coefficient is a 5-year rolling coefficient. So at the end of every season, your furthest away season drops off your total. So if you look at that graphic there, at the end of this season, the top line, season 2021, drops off. And there, the next column shows that we earned 8.5 points as a country. And that's the largest number in that column. So that's bad news. So that means at the end of this season, we drop off a fantastic year.
Okay. Well, before we get into the going forward, let's deal with the picture that we all currently understand, as in European qualification for this season. But before we do, there's one thing I think we have to explain, is that the placings have a 2-season impact lag, which I think is best explained by saying the coefficient we end this season with does not affect European qualification for next season, but the following season. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and I think that's where people get confused, because there's two sort of ways to look at it. So either the way that you've described, how we end this season, doesn't affect next year's qualification, it affects the year after, which is completely true. Where it comes in a little bit confusing is where we finish this season directly affects what the teams are playing for next season in terms of what happens at the end of the year. So how Scotland finishes in the coefficient this season will affect what next year's champions or next year's Scottish Cup winner will be awarded. But of course, the actual qualification games don't start until the following season. So really, it's a 1-year lag in terms of knowing what's on offer to the teams that are competing in the league. but the actual games that you play won't be for a further season, obviously.
Yeah. For my own understanding, to think of it as a 2-season impact lag makes it more simple.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably best displayed if we look at this graphic. Okay, so 2 seasons ago, the SPFL finished 9th in the coefficient rankings. So what did that mean for this season's Euro qualification? Well, it meant that last year's champions, i.e. Celtic, qualified automatically. And second place, which was Rangers, they had Champions League qualifying rounds, and they lost their first one, I think, and dropped into the Europa League, where they still are. I can't believe it's me talking us through this, but anyway, I'll carry on and you correct me if I go wrong. The third position there is the Scottish Cup winners, or third place, depending on whether someone in 1 or 2 win the Scottish Cup, will qualify for Europa League qualifying, which is 1 round, failing which they drop into the conference. And that third position went to who this year? Hearts?
That went to Hearts, yeah. They were third place last year, and the cup winner was Celtic, which meant that the cup winner's entry point, which is that third line, drops down the table to the physical third place team in the league.
Okay, so then the fourth position there, which was Kilmarnock, Europa League qualifying, 3 rounds, failing any of those, dropped to the conference. And fifth place, St Mirren, Conference League, 3 rounds to qualify. So that's the picture of this season.
And that was all spot on. And the key thing about finishing 9th is it's in the top 10. So for your champions to automatically enter the Champions League phase without qualifying, you need to be in the top 10. So last year, the whole battle was to try and finish in the top 10 to therefore guarantee that this season's champions at the end of this year would also get automatic qualification. Unfortunately, we didn't finish 10th. We finished 11th. And you can explain what that meant, I suppose, in terms of the season to come.
So last season, the SPFL finished 11th. What does that mean for next season's Euro qualifying? It means that the champions of this year will have 1 qualifying round. So we don't go straight into the Champions League next season. We have to play a qualifying round, failing which, if we lose, we drop into the Europa phase. Now, that's pretty interesting considering that Celtic's AGM just took place, and I heard the board reiterating that they have to plan for scenarios where there isn't Champions League money. And there's a tendency to sort of scoff at that because people think, look at us, we're doing so well. Champions League money's going to flow, for the foreseeable future. But we lose that 1 qualifying round next season, and there's no Champions League money. So,
exactly.
The business
and
has to plan for that.
Exactly. And Lowell's been planning for it for a few years. He's had in the notes to the AGM, when he was explaining why they had 70 million cash, he specifically said we need to keep it in case we don't reach the Champions League. And although 1 qualifying round doesn't sound that much, you're up against a champion from another league outside the top 10. So if you think of Austria, let's say, normally Red Bull Salzburg, but it was Sturm Graz last season. It could be again this season. Decent enough teams. Would Celtic beat them in a knockout tie that's in August where they're not into their flow yet? It's not a guarantee. Even some of the lower leagues. So you've got Midtjylland in Denmark, Dynamo Zagreb in Croatia. There's a lot of teams that would give Celtic a game. So where previously, I'm obviously only really invested in European football. So, but from a neutral point of view, I looked at Celtic hoarding all that cash and did think it was a bit much. But actually, where they're earning like 40 million from playing in the Champions League, 1 season without it, and then that is a hole that needs to be filled because their costs have gone up, wages and stuff have gone up, transfer spends have gone up while they've been getting this tournament money. So, to be honest, I don't know, I didn't see the AGM, but if Celtic fans were being critical of them, I would say it is probably quite a prudent approach to take, and I would agree with it, to be honest.
Let's run through what the other considerations are for people who finish below first. Second, this year will get you into Champions League qualifying, but there's 3 rounds to go through. And you lose any of those, you drop into Europa qualifying.
And I'll just jump in there because that is quite a big change as well. So the season we're in just now, Rangers, who were second last year, they only had 2 rounds to play. And if you lose either, you were straight into the Europa League phase. So they lost to Dynamo Kiev at Hamden, dropped straight into the Europa League phase, no more qualifying. If they're second this season, and of course that's not a given either, but whoever the second team is, they've then got 3 rounds where if you lose the first one, you don't drop into the Europa League phase, you drop into qualifying. And the problem with that means that second place is therefore not guaranteed European football, because they could conceivably lose the first Champions League qualifier, drop to the Europa League, lose that qualifier, drop to the Conference League playoff and lose that and be out of Europe. And that's exactly what happened to Serbia this year. Whoever their second team was, can't think of off the top of my head. They entered in that round because they were the 11th country last year, and they lost all 3 rounds and they're out of Europe, where their cup winner, a club called Baka Topola or similar, they're still in the Conference League. So you have this bizarre situation where second place can quite, not easily, but conceivably be out of Europe in August, and the cup winner is guaranteed league phase football all the way till Christmas.
Yeah, let's just go back to the graphic for that, because cup winner, third place, Europa League qualifying, 1 round, and then drop to the conference.
Yeah, and that's the crucial thing about, so where we've just discussed being in the top 10 is crucial for the champions. As soon as you're out of the top 10, the difference between 11th, 12th and 13th isn't that much. But for the cup winner, being in the top 12 is huge, because finishing 11th, as we did last season, means that our cup winner is still guaranteed Conference League phase football, which is huge because outside Celtic and Rangers, nobody wins enough qualifiers to actually reach the league phase. So finishing in the top 12 is a new sort of target for Scotland to try and help the third force, I suppose you would call it.
Okay, and you can see what happens to 4th and 5th there on that graphic. 4th Europa League, 3 rounds drop to conference. 5th Conference League, 3 rounds. So just a reminder, we're currently in 18th position. So there's a lot riding on what happens to our coefficient this year, depending on how well we do. So let's sort of spell out a couple of what ifs. And I suppose they're towards the darker end of the spectrum, but I have a feeling that's where you reside, Gavin. But correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's a reasonable assumption. So we started the season 17th, and UEFA doesn't really update the tables in full, whereas I do it on a weekly basis. So we're now actually 13th, but we're very close to 16th. There's not much between 13th all the way down to 16th. So it is not out of the realms of possibility. In fact, it's a probability that we will finish outside the top 15. And then there's obviously big impacts that come with that.
Okay, maybe before we jump into the what-if scenarios, can I ask you, are Champions League matches more important for points? I can imagine people watching this thinking, yeah, we're on the up, sure, Celtic are laughing, we're doing really well in the Champions League. By the way, this is being recorded before the Bruges game, so we have no idea what happened in that match. But there's a lot of confidence around at the moment. People are looking at, you know, we're going to finish with enough points to get into the playoff for last 16. So are Champions League matches more valuable for points than the other lesser European competitions, or what factors into the point scoring mechanism? And
the short answer is no. And that's where the risk is to Scotland. So it's the same amount of points on offer in all 3 competitions for a win or a draw. The only thing that's different is the money. So the money in the Champions League is tenfold of the other competitions. It's so much more. But the actual coefficient points are exactly the same. So where Celtic, at the time of recording, have 7 points in the Champions League, which is a good return after 4 games, a lot of our rival nations have that amount of points or more in the Conference League, and they've earned the same amount of coefficient points. So the problem that Scotland have had for many years now, And we mentioned it at the start of the show, Celtic are included in that, of teams that haven't been performing enough in Europe. And we've only really had 2 teams able to do anything. A lot of the other countries, Czech Republic, Austria, Switzerland, their third team has been able to go on and do well enough in Europe. So where the Conference League has been great, it's brought a lot of teams into Europe that wouldn't normally play. Hearts are having a great season so far. They're likely to make the knockout round as well. At the same time, it's a big risk for Scotland having this duopoly of only 2 teams getting into the knockout rounds consistently. So hopefully Hearts are about to change that, and going forward, Aberdeen or whoever it is can sort of push us up the way, because it's the same amount of points. So Celtic having a decent enough season in the Champions League on its own isn't enough. We need whoever it is in the Europa League and the Conference League to be doing the same or better in terms of a points total.
So we should be begrudgingly appreciating the performances in Europe of the likes of Rangers and Hearts, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. So obviously I run a neutral account and I actively support everyone, but I know how tribal Scottish football is, and I know that the fans would rather that they lost a game of chess rather than a football match like that's that competitive. So just look at it as a silver lining, I suppose. So again, it's before the games on Thursday, but if Rangers somehow were to win in France, and unfortunately I don't see that happening, Celtic don't like it, Rangers doing well, but it could help Celtic in 2 years' time in terms of what qualifying rounds they have to play.
Which brings us back to then this first scenario. What if the SPFL finishes 13th this season? What will that mean for season 26-27?
The main thing to look at is just the cup winner. So everybody else is the same. So the champions would still just have 1 round. Second place would have 3. The cup winner is the big change, because instead of having 1 Europa League qualifying round, they would have 2. And that means that they are not guaranteed Conference League phase football, because they would drop to the Conference League qualifying round. So 13th isn't really going to be an impact for Celtic or Rangers, assuming that they're second. But for the third force, Aberdeen, Hearts, whoever it's going to be, it's a major impact, because it means they are not guaranteed this £5 million and 6 European games that they are currently guaranteed.
Okay, so that's the only thing that changes then for 13th position?
Yeah, from 11th to 13th, that's the only change we'll see.
And then the next scenario is what happens if we finish, say, 18th?
Doomsday scenario, but like I say, we started this season 17th. There's a lot of analysts that simulate the matches and see where they think people will finish. Scotland, and most simulations, finish outside the top 15. So where you're heading here says, what if we finish 18th? This is the same as if we finish 16th, and it's a massive change. So starting with first, instead of having 1 Champions League qualifying round and then being guaranteed the Europa League phase, they then move to 3 qualifying rounds, and they're not guaranteed anything, because the situation I described earlier for this season's second place would then be the same for the champions in this scenario, because they could conceivably lose the first Champions League qualifying round, drop to the Europa League, lose that round, drop to the Conference League playoff and lose that as well and be out of Europe. So finishing outside the top 15 has huge ramifications for everyone. The champions, not guaranteed European football, could be out by August. Second, and this is huge, so instead of, if you remember this season, we spoke about it, Rangers had 2 Champions League qualifying rounds, lose either, they're guaranteed the Europa League phase. In this situation, they have 3 Conference League rounds just to reach the Conference League. Lose one of them and they're out of Europe. So that's a massive change in terms of how the clubs can budget, because at the moment, second place, when they came into this season, Rangers were like, well, if we muck up the Champions League rounds, it's a massive financial implication, but we'll still have Europe. We'll still have the Europa League. To then go to only having only having the Conference League and having to win 3 rounds becomes very difficult. And then the further down you go, the worse it reads. So for the cup winner, instead of being guaranteed Conference League football and only having to play 1 Europa League qualifying round, they'd have 4 Europa League qualifying rounds. So they'd start at the very beginning of the competition. So with all due respect, and I want them to do it, but with all due respect to whoever that's going to be, they're not going to win 4 rounds to reach Europe. So again, we would no longer have the 3 teams in Europe that we've enjoyed this season. And the problem with that is everybody else will. So our coefficient would just fall further and further because we don't have a third team in the Conference League sort of propping up the points total. 4th place, Conference League 3 rounds, and 5th place doesn't enter Europe. So I know I ramble on a bit here, but if you think about this season that we've just had, St Mirren were in Europe for the first time since the late 80s. They went over to Iceland. They had a great time. There was videos. Everyone loved it. In this situation, the 15 doesn't even get into Europe. So finishing outside the top 15 is like really catastrophic. And it's quite conceivably could happen this year.
That is incredibly bleak. That means like in 2 seasons' time, we could have little to no European involvement from any Scottish teams.
Everybody could be out in August. Now, I don't expect so let's say Celtic win the league again next year. I don't expect that they would then lose 3 qualifying rounds in all 3 competitions, but it happens and it could happen, especially if Rodgers comes to the end of his contract, doesn't renew, Celtic bring in a new manager, he's unproven and he has to start with 3 qualifying rounds or no Europe by August. And the same goes for your 2nd place and your cup winner. It would be a really poor situation. So that's the pessimism. That's the bleak outcome, but it's realism. It could happen. On the positive side,
let's stick to bleak. Let's stick to bleak for a second. We'll come to positive because I want to raise a point that you just mentioned there, which is Rodgers. Now, we kind of exchanged some notes before doing this, and I was speculating that maybe, I'm sure Rodgers has all this information to hand. He knew what the outlook was for Celtic in Europe. And, is it more than a coincidence that the contract he signs takes him up to this point? He's got this season to go in the Champions League, which is incredible. The automatic qualification for Celtic, massive deal. And we might look back at this season as the glory days in a few years in terms of the number of teams and the ease of entry. And then next season, all he's got to do is get through 1 qualifying round and he's in the Champions League. So there's another Champions League campaign in the Rodgers era before he hightails it out of here. And then our Celtic's Champions League fortunes take a massive downturn.
Yeah,
he will have had that information, won't he?
Yeah, his agent, his team, whoever it is that advises him, it was a really good time to come into Celtic because obviously he had burnt his bridges. His legacy was gone when he had left. There was a lot of criticism to him coming back, but he knew he was up against a weaker Rangers, let's say, and that guaranteed Champions League football. And he always spoke about the next level for Celtic was European performance. So the season we're in right now could be the best Celtic season we see for years because of the qualification implications to come. He could leave at the end of his 3-year contract. He's not walked out during the contract, so accusations of being a fraud or whatever would be harsh. He's had 3 Champions League campaigns, done really well, and at least one of them, we don't know how next season will go. He would leave a hero again. And then the next guy that comes in has a really difficult place through no fault of his own and through no fault of Celtic's budgeting. They are no longer guaranteed, or they, in this situation, would be no longer guaranteed European football and have to get through all the qualifiers again. And we saw how that went for the previous 10 years before we had the automatic places. Celtic did struggle to make the Champions League. So I hadn't thought about it until you sent me a message that actually Rodgers' 3-year contract was a really good time to take the job, and it could be a really good time to leave with your legacy intact.
Okay, I think that's enough bleakness. Let's end on a positive note. Give us some good news.
So on a positive note, we started the season 17th and we're now 13th. So we are on the way up. And I think all 3 teams will reach the knockout rounds. Celtic are on 7 points. 10 points will almost certainly, maybe 85% certainty be enough. 11 points will 99% be enough. So I think Celtic will get, and again, this is recorded before Club Bruges game. They might already have it, but I think they will get to 10 points, either by beating Bruges, Dinamo Zagreb, or Young Boys at home. They're the worst team in the competition. So great opportunity for them. In the Conference League, Hearts are on 6 points. 6 points might be enough to go through because there's only 6 games in that tournament. Another point pretty much guarantees it for them. And again, they've got a home game against one of the worst teams in the competition. The only sort of concern from a Scotland's coefficient point of view is Rangers. They've got really difficult fixtures. They're away in France this week. Then they've got Spurs. Then they've got Man United. And then they end at home to Union Saint-Gilloise of Belgium, who are a much better team than when Rangers played them a few years ago. So assuming Rangers can beat USG, which is a big assumption at the end of January, then they too should make the knockout rounds. So we'll have all three teams from our country in the knockout rounds, I predict. And then it'll just be how many do our rival nations have through. So if they only have two or hopefully even one team through into the knockout round, we would then have a sort of 3-on-1 approach to try and finish as high as we can in the rankings. And the more points we accrue this year, because it's a 5-year rolling coefficient, that will help immensely in these future seasons where we're talking about Scotland might be 16th, 17th, 18th. If it's not this season, then it certainly will be a big chance next season. The more points added this season, the better chance of staving off the doomsday in the coming years.
Okay, it would be crazy to ask you to predict where we're going to finish in this table because there's just so many variables, but I'm happy to end on a positive note. Maybe we can get you back when all's said and done and we know where we finish in the table and we can spell out what that means for the future. But as for today, I think you've done an amazing job, Gavin, of helping us understand this whole difficult issue.
No, it's good to come on, Gavin, speak to other people that are passionate about Scottish football. I think Scotland will finish 13th in this season's coefficient table. I think all three teams will get into the knockout rounds, but I just don't think we'll have enough to catch Austria or Norway, who are the two teams above us. But 13th is a good finish from where we started, which is 17th, and where we're predicted to finish over the next couple of years.
All right, Gavin, thanks a lot for being here. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Good to speak to you, Gav.
So I'll just bring Brian back. You guys are just on mute. Thanks, Steve. So great chat with Gavin from Scotland's Coefficient. It was pretty bleak for a period there, not least the fact that we sort of grudgingly going to have to hope that Rangers continue to get a few results in Europe at least.
Let them get to the final and then get beat again, you know?
Yeah, well, yeah.
No, I don't know about that.
I'm not sure about that either. I would let them get to the semis as a bare minimum, or about an absolute maximum. I'm not having any of this final nonsense. That's just too nervy. Anything can happen in a one-off final. But yeah, like obviously we always want to see them beat, but realistically, we're all gonna have to chip into this, and that doomsday scenario is it's not that potentially far away if we keep having seasons like we've had, other than the odd one where Rangers go on a run recently. It's going to drop off as the sort of chat and the graphic sort of suggested. Doc here is saying, yeah, the future of the coefficient looks depressing. I think I sort of the initial part of that conversation definitely pushed us down that route. I guess the upside and what the guys finished on is that we are probably having a better season than anyone really expected. Obviously, Rangers won that game in France by I think 4-0, ridiculous result. Bit of a shock, but good for the coefficient. We got the point against Bruges, and hopefully we'll add the difference. So, yeah, the sort of extrapolation by Gav, or both Gavs, on Rodgers' contract was pretty interesting as well. And I guess he will be across that. And if we do have a good season this season and next season, and other Scottish clubs can get some results as well, I guess that means that things look a bit more positive, and he's, I would guess he'd be more likely to renew at that point. But you'd be surprised if he renewed early, wouldn't you, Steve?
Well, I mean, if he's going to renew early, now's the time to do it, isn't it? Because at the end of this season, he's got 1 year left. If there was a player in a similar position, you'd be thinking he was gone if he hadn't renewed by the end of the season. So, and I think the club would look at it that way as well. So, I think kind of diverging a bit here, but I think the Brendan Rodgers contract situation should be right at the top of the agenda for the board to get something done, and I'd like to see that done before the end of the season. As far as the coefficient concerned, that was an excellent piece there, and really good information from Gavin. It does look a bit bleak, but that really underlines the poor job that the Celtic board have done over the past few years in prioritising European football. I mean, even if you go back, we could go back for the last decade, and we've underperformed each and every year. And I think there's been like a 2 decades, really. Yeah, there's been a cumulative effect to that, rolling down through all these coefficient tables. We've never performed properly. We've never invested properly in the squad up till this season, before the European campaign started. And it just remains to be seen. If we have to go into qualifiers again, will it be the same old story? Will it be waiting to see if we qualify for the Champions League before we spend any money? Will it be loan signings on the last week and all this sort of nonsense that we've done in the past? Or whether we've learned a lesson and we invest real money and we use that cash that's in the bank that's meant to be there for a rainy day. If we have to qualify for the Champions League, we go and build the squad to do it before the qualifiers rather than after them, or a week before them, or some sort of nonsense like that. So I think the signs are good, that there has been a shift in attitude. And I think, potentially, next season's Champions League, we're going to have one qualifier to play anyway. And I think we should be building towards that from the January transfer window on. So I think the signs are good, but we can't afford to fall any further behind. We just can't afford to have any more disastrous seasons in Europe, and that needs to be reflected in the board strategy.
Absolutely agree.
I would
Brian,
say, guys,
thoughts on the video?
I would say, the video was fantastic, and again, it gave me a wee bit of heebie-jeebies initially. But the more I look at it, you look at the team under Ronnie, when Ronnie came through, Ronnie Dyla, he had Mastorovic and Luvens in centre defence. He had Chowdhury and Izagiri on the wings, on the left back, right back. We have CCV, Trusty, and Scales, AJ, Taylor and/or Valle. The team that Ronnie had to go into Europe with was a bunch of journeymen, the likes of Nadir Chifke and Joe Inga Berge and Tyler Blackett. Look at what we have now. Maida, Ida, Ralston, Scales, McCown, Kuhn get it against Tonev and Colleen Kazim Richards. Kalmark's obviously the same, and so is Forrest. So I have no worries. This team and Bernardo, this team know what it takes. And this sort of anxiety about qualifying for the Champions League and the qualifiers and all the rest of it, I think that's the team of the past. We're going to have to go and qualify against somebody, Dynamo Zagreb or Servette or whoever the hell it is. But if we can't do it, we don't deserve to be there. But you think the players we have now compared to then, they're night and day. I really mean that.
You're spot on, Brian, but I think the risk here is as soon as you've got a good squad together and players are playing at a really high level, which we've got a number, and there's others that are looking like they can step up to that level as well, is then the vultures, are looking around, the sharks are circling, and we'll struggle to keep that squad together. So I agree with Steve. I think the board needs to be, there'll be a lot of Celtic fans saying we don't really need to add much in January. The squad's good, but it's almost certain that you won't keep this squad together by the end of the summer window. So on that basis, the manager, the money men, they need to be having a clear idea of who is likely to still be around and who's potentially looking for a move in the summer. And in an ideal world, getting those targets in now to replace those players and bed them in for 6 months. Look at Kuhn. Came in, yes, he had health issues, fitness issues, but getting that time to bed in and then a full pre-season. Look at the player we've got now. Some of those players aren't going to settle. I mean, like some players come in and like Matt O'Reilly and Rio Hatate, when they came in on the January window and they hit the ground running and they're away. But others aren't. Others are going to take a few months to adjust to Scottish football, adjust to a new country, a new city. So I'm completely with you, Steve. We need to be identifying where we need. There's already positions we need to strengthen. We could do with an extra winger or utility, forward player, and left back still needs to be resolved. But we've got to be aware that the squad will turn, and I think we need to be doing some business in January, including out the door as well as in.
Yeah, Rodgers, I would just give him whatever he wants. Just what do you want, Brendan? He's the most important part of the jigsaw. We can get players in and out and all the rest of it. He, at the minute, is the most important person at the club. End of.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brian. 100%. I think that's the most important bit of business we can do. But we're in a really good position at the moment because we've got at least 3 players in our first team squad that we could sell tomorrow for 20 million plus. I'd say I'd put Kuhn is in that bracket. I'd say probably Hatate's in that bracket, and Alistair Johnson is potentially in that bracket as well. So that's 3 players that we can go and sell for 20 million. Now I don't expect us to sell all 3 of them. I'd be very surprised if we did. But we could say, even if you sold 2 of them, if you sold Hatate out the midfield, there's talk of Lennon Miller coming across. We are well served for midfielders. We've got a lot of good midfielders already there with Engels coming on board. If you sold maybe Nicholas Kuhn, you'd obviously have to go to market for another wide player, but then you've got 40 million in the kitty before you even spend a penny. And we've showed that we have the ability and we have the forward thinking to buy players in the 10 to 15 million range. And that'll be the sort of quality we're looking at. So as long as we've got a strategic plan in place to do that window after window, then I think we'll be okay when the shakedown eventually happens in the Champions League, and I think we'll end up being in the mix. But we have to get it right. And one thing that concerns me, and I hate to go back to this again, it's the Brendan-Rodgers situation, because we have got the potential to stuff up a managerial appointment, as we know. We've done it in the past and we'll do it again. So who comes after Brendan if he goes? It's as you say, Brian, to use your terminology, that gives me the heebie-jeebies. Yeah. Thinking about who's coming next if he decides to go after 3 years. So I think that's the biggest risk we're sitting with at the moment. And I agree with you 100%. That should be the top item of business at the next board meeting.
Somebody in the board, is doing something right, because you look at, we were scouting Postecoglou, we scouted Maresca. So somebody within the organisation of it. I think Brendan will stay, and the reason I say this, I think we'll get the treble this year. I think we'll do well in Europe, and then I think at the end of it, it'll be the big all singing, all dancing kind of 5-year contract, and then he'll bail after 2 years. But
I guess like a player though, that protects the club as well. If he's got extension to his contract, I think as long as he doesn't leave mid-season, fans will be accepting that. Much like when there's an offer for a player that's too good to refuse. We don't want it to happen, but we're all sort of wise enough these days that it's kind of got to happen. If he left at the end of a closed season with an extension in beyond the 3 years, say after 4, and he still had 2 years to run, we get a compensation payment by a big, a richer club coming in from. I don't think anyone's going to complain too hard about that. So I agree with you guys. I think it's a real important bit of business that we do. Just going to highlight this comment of Mahesh. He said, I don't know, and I'd be interested to see how he's worked his numbers here, but we know he's a numbers guy. So he reckons to get Celtic to Martin O'Neill's Celtic Euro club coefficient from back 20 odd years ago, Celtic need to spend a minimum of 20 million per transfer window for 4 windows. Way too risky for the club's finances. Now, the thing I would say is interesting that that's the number. I don't necessarily think that is risky for the club's finances. If we're spending 20 million gross, maybe, but the net spend is nearly zero over the last few windows. To Steve's point, because we've worked really well on buying players, developing players, and then selling them for a significant profit because they've been on extended contracts. So I actually think, without wanting to sell the family silver, we know that players will move on. Somebody like Luke McCowan, Celtic is probably his final destination. But for players like Bernardo and Engels, that's not going to be the case. They are going to move on to richer clubs and bigger leagues. So it's about selling them at the right time. If you look at the business we did with Matt O'Reilly, we sold him for 30 million. We had a negative net spend, and you'd argue, I think you can make a case for arguing that we haven't missed him. Now, that's crazy because he was such a good player. But in terms of the results and the performances this season, with what we've added and how the team's developed, his performances individually haven't necessarily been missed. So I think Steve's right. We need to continue to get that strategy right, be brave, and sort of sell players at the right time, but make sure the pipeline management is there. And that's why I'm pushing for, being aggressive in the market in January and really pushing us in a position of strength, and push on from there. And there's a couple other comments. Martin Nisbet is saying we can't afford to stand still. Absolutely agree. Who's the snitch is asking selling already. I think we all know that we'll have to sell. We don't want to sell, but it will happen to our best players. Before we get into Hibs, and I'll leave that there. I think the coefficient discussion, it was a great piece by the two Gavins, and I'm sure we'll float it around social media. So anyway, you guys enjoyed that, please sell it. Please share it on. Mahesh is just coming back saying, yes, this is assuming no big sales. Well, yeah, I think we can't assume that. I think it's pretty likely we will continue to have big sales with the talent pool we've currently got. Just a quick one. Sorry. Before we get into Hibs, we'll leave the coefficient there. I'm sure it'll do the rounds on social media. Before we get into Hibs, I just wanted to respond to this. Who's the snitch? Thanks for checking in on Dano. Yeah, the Korean situation was a bit hairy earlier in the week, but I was exchanging some messages with him in the aftermath, and yeah, he's all good. I think, he was downplaying it, and sort of it was more like a 4 hours of, decision to put martial law in, and then basically a backflip within 4 hours as that was forced to withdraw that and turn it round. So, yeah, all good. Dano is good, and I imagine, I don't know for sure, but I imagine he will be back on a drink along soon. So yeah, thanks for the concern, appreciate it. But our American correspondent in Korea is doing well. So look, guys, we're over the hour, so we'll just get a touch on the big game on the weekend, which is Hibs coming to Celtic. They've got them, they've got themselves off the bottom of the league. They've leapfrogged city rivals Hearts, which I think we're probably all quite mildly amused by. The form table has them at 8th. I think they've won 1, drawn 2, and lost 3 in the last few games. I don't have that in front of me, so that's kind of off the top of my head from earlier when I was checking it. Just really quickly, thoughts on Hibs ahead of Dynamo Zagreb. Do we expect to see some significant changes in that match?
No, I don't really expect to see too many changes. I think the starting 11 will probably be pretty similar to what we saw last night, and that's with a view to the same starting 11 playing against Zagreb. I don't think he'll make wholesale changes. I think Hibs will be a difficult game. I caught bits of their game, the mad game they had against Aberdeen, and they did well in that game to come back from 2 potentially losing positions really late in the game. So you've got to give them credit for that, and they've certainly improved a bit from where they were earlier in the season. So we'll get a tough game off them. But it comes down to every team that comes to Celtic Park. It comes down to whether we can get an early goal, settle the place down, settle the fans down, and just start to take the pressure off ourselves early. You get half time 0-0, it becomes a lot more frantic in the second half. So it'll be the same as every other home game we've had at Celtic Park against sort of lower opposition in the Scottish League, and it'll come down to whether we can start well and get the early goal. I expect us to win the game, and hopefully we can get it sort of put to bed by half time, and then sort of wrap up some of our more key players in cotton wool ahead of Zagreb. I'm thinking particularly about the defenders who are going to be front and centre in Zagreb. I think it's a game we're going to spend a lot of time on the back foot. So Cameron Carter-Vickers, maybe Alistair Johnson. I'd maybe like to see these guys getting a rest if we're well ahead in the game, But I fully expect all those guys to start.
Brian, thoughts? Do you think there'll be wholesale changes, or do you think more like Steve? It'll be relatively the strongest.
Apologies, my dogs are snoring behind me there. No, I think there'll be very little changes. I think get in, get the job done, and then Stephen says take players off and rest them. Hibs, okay, they should have no issues. You look at Ross County last week, 5-0 up at half time. I expect, not that I expect being arrogant, but I would like to think we would be 3 or 4 up at half time, and then introduce the likes of Ralston and I don't know. I think Taylor played his way into the Champions League. Then again, who knows? But I think we'll win. I think there'll be no problems, and the train rolls on.
Yeah, I think we'll win as well, but I tend to disagree. I think we will see some changes. The Champions League games comes around on Tuesday, so Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday is a pretty tight turnaround. 3 games in a week. I don't think you put somebody like Luke McCowan. I feel Hatate and Bernardo played really well, so justifies the selection. But McCowan can feel pretty hard done by to come off the back of 3 assists and a goal, and really run the show, man of the match, and to drop out of the team. I don't think we'd have lost much if he'd played, and yeah, I can see him coming back in. In terms of defense, you maybe don't bring Scales back in, but again, he had a really good performance. He's more than capable at that level. So it depends how CCV's pulled up after, those games. And yeah, you might just mix up some of the wing and forward line, and I don't think at that level we probably do too much damage. And then you've got the bench to pull you out of a hole if you need it. So there's 2 strategies. You could obviously go all guns blazing and then try and get it done by half time like it was last week, or you can mix it up a bit and they might still get it done, or if not, you can go at the bench. But I think either way, I think we're all in agreement. I think it'll be a reasonably comfortable victory. But you're right, Steve. The early goal is crucial. Before we go, we've got Mark Nesbitt just giving us his team line. So he's going with Ralston, CCV, Scales, Taylor. So bit of change there. McGregor, McCowan, Bernardo, Forrest, Ida, Kuhn. So there's a mix of typical first 11 and others. Whether there be that much there, I'm in favour of giving that a crack, as long as you've got the extra firepower on the bench, because Zagreb's massive. I do think we can beat Young Boys at home and that gets us through, but I'm still an advocate of getting as many points as you can, and see where it takes us up that table. And yes, coefficient points, but also cash in the bank and potentially a better opportunity to get through that playoff as well. So yeah, exciting times as usual to be a Celtic fan. Steve, you back on Monday? You'll be hosting Monday, is that right?
Yeah.
So Steve,
we'll be back on Monday. We'll run through the Hibs game, and we'll have a more comprehensive look at Zagreb.
Absolutely. And I will be back next Thursday, and we'll cover Zagreb and look ahead to the weekend, which will be the cup final, I imagine. So yeah, lots to look forward to. Thanks to everyone in the comments today. Enjoyed your company. Hope you enjoyed the show, and especially the segment that Gavin's recorded. Please like, share, all those things if you get the chance. It does help us. We're obviously only in our 2nd year. And other than that, all left to be said is have a great night. Hail, hail.
Hail, hail, boys.
Hail, hail.